The most common phrase I hear at school assemblies or family gathering is, our children are our future. But what happens if that future becomes threatened from within? What if the very children we are upholding are the ones slaughtering our futures instead because of a justice system unable to hold them accountable? If the juvenile system doesn't change, we're not protecting the future. We're sentencing it. I remember hearing about a case not too long ago. An average teenage boy, ordinary and plain, seen by no one as a threat. Yet still, he was capable of assaulting not one, but 5 different women. And instead of being punished for his outrageous crime, he was instead protected by the juvenile system and sentenced to a measly 10 days. While the court decided on leniency for the boy, the woman he assaulted had no relief. Some might argue that the juvenile system allows adolescents to live the rest of their lives to the fullest, but what about those who are victim to these crimes? That story really struck me. Not because it was something unheard of, but because it's not. Cases where the juvenile system protects the guilty youth has been going on for centuries. Cases like the murder of James Burglar is what makes me wonder, how did we get here? When did the legal system become one which protects the guilty and punishes the innocent? Well, the truth is, we didn't just get here overnight, but instead, it's been creeping up on us over time. So what exactly is going on with the juvenile system today? Let's take a look. Most times, the severity of committing crimes ranging from shoplifting to assault to murder are all simply dismissed because of one's age. But let's be clear. Turning 18 doesn't magically instill morality, which is why we need to reconsider how we define accountability. If a person is capable of giving consent, also recognizes the legal age of consent, then why wouldn't they be able to understand the consequences of wrongdoings and be held to the same standard as an adult? Let's be clear. Youth might be connotated as innocence in literature, but in our legal system, it shouldn't. A young offender is now met with more compassion and sympathy than actual victims. Why? Because they're too young. They have their whole life ahead of them. They don't know any better. But what about those who are forever scarred or those who won't have a life ahead of them? Let's take a look at another example, one which is more than just a study. Just 3 years ago, in 2022, a group of students were involved in the heinous assault of another unsuspecting boy. Unfortunately, he was unable to escape this ruthless attack and eventually passed away. But what is truly frustrating is that one of the students who was caught and charged with manslaughter was only sentenced to 18 months. Yes, he was given a second chance at life, but what about the young boy's parents who in court said had an entire life ahead of them, a future brimming with promises and potential? What about those other parents who said they now felt as if it was unsafe for their children? Now, the unreasonable thinking of the justice system may already come as a shocker to many, but the case in which the flaw of the juvenile system really starts to unravel is when these adolescents go on and recommit crime. No, they don't do this because they're inherently evil, but rather because the juvenile system has taught them consequences are optional. I mean, who can blame them? If I barely get held accountable the first time, what's stopping me from doing it a second or third time? I'm sure many of you in the audience would have heard of the case of James Burglar. James's mother was out on a family shopping trip. To his mother, it was nothing besides an ordinary day. Yet, unbeknownst to her, leaving James unattended for just a second will lead to the kidnapping and murdering of her little boy. No, this wasn't done by some criminal mastermind, but rather it was done by 2 young boys, both only 10 at the time. They were successfully caught, that's undeniable, but they were also protected and shielded by the juvenile system. They were given new identities and a new chance at life. People said that perhaps with time they would change. They argued that they were simply just troubled children. Yet one of them, John Venables, proved that without accountability, nothing could be achieved. In 2010, Venables was back in prison after the police had found indecent photos of children on his device. Although released 3 years later, in 2017, he was back in prison for possessing similar photos. So I ask you, how many more second chances will we be giving? Because this isn't the first time it has happened. It has become a pattern regularly occurring in our juvenile system because it has failed to hold these individuals accountable. Would Venables really have gone back into prison if he received true punishment the first time? When did age become the protector of the guilty instead of just being numbers marking milestones in life? It is time we stop connotating youth with innocence, because from time to time again, these children who we thought were innocent has committed some of the most horrendous crimes because they aren't just children. And they do understand. They can lie, they can harm, and they can kill. We need a system that doesn't treat crime as just a phase. We need to stop throwing out second chances because James never received a second chance, and so did many others. So what exactly needs to change? Let's take a look. Well, a decent start would be aligning the age of criminal responsibility with the legal age of consent. Now, you might have some questions, but let me explain. If the law already legally recognizes a 16-year-old or even younger in some country is capable of understanding the consequences of committing sexual intercourse, then why wouldn't they also understand the consequences of wrongdoings? Researchers Destiny and Cowell has actually shown that kids as young as 3 can begin to understand the consequences of wrongdoings. We can't be certain when a person is mature enough, but the legal age of consent is a point at which the law legally recognizes a person of being capable of committing a serious and potentially life-changing decision. It's a legal recognition of their mental and emotional capacity, and it's a point at which society states that at this point, adolescents should understand boundaries, consequences, and the outcome of their actions. Now, critics may argue that age of criminal responsibility and the legal age of consent has nothing to do with each other. However, if the law already states that a person is capable of making one life-altering decision, then it stands to reason that they should be able to handle other responsibilities. There are multiple flawed aspects within the juvenile system that needs to change, like enforcing harsher punishments overall. However, this proposition can be the first step within this battle. By using the legal age of consent as the threshold for our legal system, we're no longer basing punishments on generalized guidelines, but rather we are creating a system in which the legal constitutions already recognizes the maturity level of a person. This isn't about targeting and punishing the offenders more harshly, but it's about creating a system which makes sense. This is something I've always truly been passionate about, because I'm a teenager too. I know exactly what kids my age are exposed to. I know exactly what kids my age have said. I know exactly what kids my age can do. I've read the news. I've heard rumors. I've heard horrible things being said as if they're just harmless jokes. And that really scares me, because I know these people will never be held accountable just because of their age. I'm passionate about this because I believe in justice. I want to see justice not for the offenders, but for the victims who are too often forgot about. I'm passionate about this because as a future student of law, I want to grow in a system that upholds justice. I'm passionate about this because the world has chosen silence. The legal system promises to protect the rights of every individual, ensure the safety and security of all members, and provide a fair and impartial system for resolving disputes. But this isn't going to happen until the blueprint for a reform system is drawn. It is time we start constructing a juvenile system that isn't afraid of accountability. Thank you.